So we wanted to give you the opportunity to kind of think about this a little bit and put it into practice using a scenario. So I'm going to just quickly read the scenario that we've put out here, um, and wanting to get your thoughts, or at least have you just think about, if you want to enter your thoughts in the chat, or feel free to unmute and share with us, wanting you to think about Audrey's mindset in this scenario and how she might have done things differently. So Audrey is a business major taking her first course in accounting. After her first quiz goes poorly, Audrey feels confused, lost, and frustrated. She quietly commiserates with a few classmates during class about how the professor bores students with long PowerPoint presentations and doesn't teach the material, which makes her feel better that she's not the only one that notices. After the first exam goes poorly, Audrey recognizes that she's failing the course and becomes angry that the teacher uses the lectures to talk about examples of life as an accountant and doesn't cover all of the material necessary for the test. The professor asks Audrey to come to office hours because of her grade, and when she arrives, provides some suggestions for tutoring and mentions that if she can earn an A on future tests, it's possible to pass the class with a C. Audrey tells the professor that she got A's in high school math and that the professor doesn't teach in a way that makes sense. She decides to drop the course and take it with another professor next time. So in thinking about this scenario, would you say that Audrey's mindset was fixed or growth?
Fixed.
Fixed. And why do you think it's fixed, Zoe?
Because when she first found out she was having problems, she could have gone to her professor and asked what she could do to fix it, or asked him to maybe explain it better. But she just talked about how she didn't like her professor with her classmates. Or she could have gone to her classmates and said, hey guys, it looks like we're all not doing good. Maybe we should study together. Maybe we should all talk to him before we all fail, and not waiting so long.
Right. So kind of not putting up that immediate barrier that it's because my professor doesn't teach this the way that she should. That's why I'm not learning it. Not trying to find some of those other solutions.
Yeah.
So what would you do if you were one of Audrey's classmates? I mean, I think you kind of said this, but if you were Audrey's classmate, what would you do if she came to you for some advice?
Megan also said fix too, because instead of talking to the teacher to get extra help to fix her situation, Audrey decided that she'd rather drop the course.
Right. Great. Thank you, Megan. So either of you wondering, what advice would you give Audrey if she came to you after class and said, I don't think this professor's teaching this well, I'm failing this class. What might you tell her to help her work through this using a growth mindset?
I would just tell her to talk to her professor and to keep working on it instead of just giving up.
Okay.
Just keep trying.
Yeah. Anything from Megan?
We'll give Megan a minute because she might be typing.
Yeah, no problem. So I think you're absolutely right, Zoe. How do we, and I think this is good for us to think about too. Maybe I liked what you mentioned about if you're all struggling with that issue, if you're not the only one who's struggling with it, okay, I mean, that's great to know and probably does help give you some validation. But then what can we do about it together to be in a growth mindset instead of bringing each other down to the same level and saying, yeah, this is stupid. Okay, we're in the same boat. How can we work as a team to go forward with this?
Mm-hmm.
Megan said, I would say maybe talk to the teacher and try to find a solution rather than just giving up. Communication with teachers and staff is really important when you're in school and struggling.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Those are great responses. Thank you both.
Thanks, guys.
So if you're willing, we, as we're talking about this, I don't know if that scenario rang true to anybody else, not just me, because I have probably multiple examples of this from when I was in college. Jill mentioned that her kind of make or break class was Calculus 2 to help her determine what she was not going to do. For me, it was organic chemistry, which I failed, the only time in my life I've ever failed a class. And there were probably a lot of things, thinking back on it now, that I could have done rather than just sort of sit back and say, well, I'm just not getting this and I don't really know what to do about it. And I'm just going to sort of complain rather than take action. So we were curious to have you all think about a time when you were struggling with a concept or an assignment or some other issue, or maybe one that you're struggling with currently, and kind of think about, how did you initially handle this challenge? Was it using a fixed mindset, a growth mindset? And what could you do or could you have done differently to work through it with a growth mindset framework in mind? So if anybody has anything they want to share with that, and I know Jody and I can probably share some examples too, love to hear it.
I have one.
Okay.
Actually, just before this, right before this call, I was taking an exam for my stats class, and I was so confused. And I was like, I don't know how to do this. I still don't know how to do it, but I should have opened it. Well, I was having some tech issues, so I couldn't do it. It was due on the 7th, but he gave me an extension because I couldn't open it. But I didn't open it until the 6th. So I should have done it way before that, so I could have figured out that I had a problem. And then I would have had time to email him and say, like, I'm confused about this. Like, can you please, like, elaborate on what you mean?
Mm-hmm.
But because I waited so long, I don't really have time to do that.
Right. So that's funny. One of the columns that we have, on one side it's kind of the fixed mindset, and on the other side is the growth. And one says, I don't have time, and the other says, I can plan for this, right? So that's a great example of, maybe a growth mindset. Part of it is saying, how am I going to think about whatever problem I'm dealing with and make sure I give myself enough time to do that, so that if I do need some support or need to work through another way of tackling it, I can have the time to do that. So that's a great example, Zoe. Thank you for being open and sharing that with us. I'm sure you're not the only one with that experience.
Yeah.
I think it's important too that, a lot of times we beat ourselves up for what's done and in the past, and that's kind of like the it's over piece of fixed mindset, right? Like, I can't go back, I can't. And I think that was what maybe Audrey was experiencing, is like some things are a done deal. But then it's an opportunity. And unfortunately, there are opportunity costs, right? Like, so you might not ever get the chance to redo that assignment or redo that test. But what have you learned from it that's going to help you be a better student in the future? That's so valuable. And in some ways, failure is more valuable. If you've never failed, you don't know how to regroup from failure or from struggling. But if you have struggled and you have failed at something in the past and you have gotten yourself back on your feet again and moved forward, you have a lot more perspective to see it as an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And so now, Zoe, you know what it's like to not have the information from your professor, but you also know, hey, I'm not going to do that to myself again. I'm going to go and reach out to my professor when something is unclear, and I'll do it right away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
I know for me, the pandemic itself has really caused me to practice using a growth mindset. I think something I've come across just in my work is that I work really hard to try to help people find solutions to problems. And so when everybody has so many challenges right now related to COVID and just in general, but yet none of us have ever experienced anything like this before, right? So we're all forced to kind of be in a growth mindset because nobody knows the answer to a lot of the questions and challenges that are being brought up. And so I really had to challenge myself to say, just because I don't have a solution doesn't mean it's not worth talking about. It doesn't mean that it's not worth, trying to get there or collaborating. And I even went so far as to, in some meetings that I coordinate and thinking about some of these problems, as to say out loud to people, I'm really uncomfortable with the fact that I don't have a solution to this problem, or I don't have an answer to this question, but I still think it's worth us talking about, because that's the only way we're going to even move in that direction. And just naming something sometimes is enough to help you move forward. And so I think that's a big one for me, is just acknowledging when I have discomfort about something or I'm growing, that's really difficult for me personally to do. But I think it is super helpful, and it's likely that other people appreciate that as well, because it gives them permission to say what they're struggling with or what they're uncomfortable with.
One of the things I love about your story, Hannah, is that it's a great illustrator of neuroplasticity, and one of the indicators our brains gives us that we're learning is feeling frustrated and struggling. The more you struggle at something, the more ready your brain is to form those new connections. So even though we experience stress in learning sometimes and frustration in learning, it means that it's really opening gateways for us because we are ready to build new knowledge if we can power through that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right. Any additional thoughts or questions about this? All right. So Jody and I wanted to give you a little bit of a taste of growth versus fixed mindset and get you thinking about that and how it might apply to goal setting. And so we each have some next steps here for you to take, and we're going to kind of take this conversation to the next level within that. So for me, for Manistee Commitment Scholars, your next steps are to complete the October meetup activity in Canvas, explore and draft your desired winter class schedule. So kind of doing what Jill mentioned, doing some planning, make an appointment with an advisor so you can schedule those winter classes. And then plan to attend the next meetup on November 10th at 4 p.m. So I will be posting the recording and an assignment. It's going to be a brief activity once again, but helping you kind of put this into practice in Canvas, and I'll let you know when that's available. And you know how to get a hold of me if you have questions. So Jody, what are Promise Scholars' next steps?
Before I hop to that, I want to share this success story, I would say, of Megan's that she just put in the chat. She said, I'm currently in sociology and have been struggling with the course load and the amount of work we have, and talked to the teacher, and we found a solution to Zoom call this week and brainstorm ideas on how to organize all the work and make sure it's turned in before it's due. So right there, what a great example of using growth mindset. When she was feeling that struggle, she didn't stop and say, okay, this subject is not for me, or I can't learn sociology. Instead, she reached out to the help she knew was there, to her professor. So beautiful. Thank you, Megan, for sharing.
Yes, thank you.
Along the same lines of what Hannah said, I'm hoping that all of our Promise Scholars will set at least one academic goal, one personal goal, and one financial or career goal. And I've got that set up. I had a goal setting assignment, but I will let you know when that is updated in our Canvas so that you can set those goals for yourself. And then there's a September follow-up discussion on, this says time management. Oops, I need to change that. It's actually October's follow-up is on study skills. And study skills really go right along with growth mindset, because studying is really a process of making your brain struggle so that it can hold on to information longer. We remember the things in our life that were hard. And the reason we do is because our brain struggled and our brain said, okay, I'm not going to do this again. I'm going to hold on to this information. So when we make information hard for us, we study a lot, we test ourselves, that's how we retain information. So that's the lesson that you guys have this month for October. And then the next meetup is November 10th at 4 p.m., as Hannah said. And if you guys have any questions, please share with me. Watch your announcements this week, because I'm going to be letting you know more about incentives that are coming up for Mason County Promise Scholars and how to obtain those. And one of the ways that you obtain them is by doing a check-in with me and working through some of the stuff in Canvas and attending the meetup. So thank you for doing that. As always, if you have questions, jodym@ludington.org, and my number is there on the screen.
Thanks, Jody. And quick reminder for Manistee Commitment Scholars, if you are watching the recording, you fulfill your participation requirement for the program by completing the meetup activity in Canvas. So please be sure and do that even if you're not joining us live. So, all right.